Okay, so shoe size runs in the family. All right? I don't know if that's a scientific fact or not, but trust me, I have all the proof that I need. You see, my grandfather wears a size 14 shoe. And like he isn't as tall as he used to be, but he still literally and metaphorically casts such a long shadow over our family. He's a good man, hardworking and funny and compassionate, and honestly, he tells the best stories too, like this one. So when he was 12 years old, his mother told him that they were going to go to the doctor so he could have his tonsils removed. Right? Fair enough and all, except that when he woke up after surgery, his throat wasn't sore because she had taken him to be circumcised instead. That or the doctor missed, right? Anyway, let me cut to the point. Sorry, there's no way around it. Sorry. He's a good man. Good man. And to be honest, I look up to him quite a bit. If I could be half as wise as he is, if I could be half the father to my two girls as he has been to his two girls, I would be such a lucky man. But just in case I don't live up to those expectations, there is one thing that we have in common, and that's that I wear a size 14 as well. And you may be asking, like, okay, but seriously, what does shoe size have to do with to be continued? Actually, everything. Let me explain. So we spent the entire week walking with Elijah, watching God call him and use him and do amazing things through him. But we have to be really careful here, because if we're not paying attention, we'll miss the point of the entire week. Because while we have spent so much time with Elijah over the past few days, we have to remember that, to be continued, and this story isn't really about Elijah at all. I know this because last night we met another man named Elisha. And all of a sudden, we're watching and finding out what to be continued looks like as the story shifts from Elijah to Elisha. And I know, right? I know that we like to pride ourselves as being self-made people. Being people who have worked for what we have and who have done everything by the power of our own two hands. But to be honest, that's not 100% true. Because you didn't pick where you were born. You didn't pick the family that you were born into. You didn't pick the tone of your skin. You didn't pick your genetics, and you didn't pick your generational sins either. And it seems, if you really start to do the math, that so much of what we have in life has been given to us. And dare I even say this, that yes, if you're truly to follow Jesus, you have a part of the equation. It is up to you to make the decision to follow him. But you wouldn't be here today if someone years ago, or maybe even weeks ago, hadn't passed on the faith to you as well. And so you might ask, well, if like so much of this is actually out of our control, what do we have a say in? What do we actually get to do? And I believe that, to be continued about this. What do you do with what you've been given? And if you figure that out, I think you figure to be continued out. If you remember last night, we heard about the call of Elisha. And Elijah comes to this man and says, "Come and follow me." And we know that Elisha really had a lot of good things going for him. He was pretty wealthy, had a good, comfortable life. But Elijah is persuaded to follow Elijah and says, "Okay, great, let's go." And Elijah tells Elisha, "You're going to take over for me." And I have to believe that Elijah says, "Okay, when?" And Elijah would then have to say, about that. It's easy to miss this when we actually look back on it throughout history, but it may be only a couple of pages from 1 Kings 19, our text from last night, to 2 Kings chapter 2, our text for this afternoon. It's only a few pages in your Bibles or a quick flip on your cell phone. But actually what you have here is you have a period of close to 18 years that Elisha followed Elijah around waiting for his time to take over the ministry. That's a lot of waiting. And I have to believe that there were times when Elijah and Elisha would be sitting there and Elijah would just go, my goodness, what am I doing? I'm wasting the best years of my life following this guy around, waiting for my turn. In fact, not only what am I doing, but God, what are you doing? When are you going to finally deliver on what you called me to do? And it's funny, I believe that God is a big, powerful God, but it seems like I spend a lot of my life waiting on him. But here's the thing that I've learned about waiting, is that waiting takes time. My sophomore year in high school, I took Spanish 1. Now, it's not important that I took Spanish. In fact, that has nothing to do with the story. What is relevant to this story is that right next to the Spanish 1 class was the Latin 4 class. And Tori Lee was in this Latin 4 class. Now, I had met her the summer before, and I had just really kind of fallen for this girl. And once I found out that we went to the same high school, I did everything that I could do over the next 2 semesters to put myself as geographically close to her at all times. Some people would call that stalking, and they are correct. Now, there's a little note here because Tori was actually a senior in high school and I was a sophomore, which created some just natural barriers to me following her around the school. I mean, she was like a senior taking upper level classes and I was a sophomore taking lower level classes. She was like literally an 18-year-old woman, right, who could vote to go off to war, but I was 15 and couldn't even drive. But you might be asking, like, why? Why all the effort? Well, because, you see, up until this point, my dating profile had been somewhat limited and lacking. I mean, yeah, there were a couple of girls, like, at Bible camp and church camp and stuff like that, but let's be honest. I mean, to be the most eligible bachelor at church camp, all you really have to do is know all the motions to Lord, I lift your name on high. So that's really kind of a small pool. And there was another girl that I dated before that, and well, her family raised ferrets. Yeah, which, yeah. You've never seen a ferret. I'm not sure why you're applauding. It sounds exotic and all, yes, but trust me, nothing ruins the mood faster than getting ferret dander in your mouth. And so I went into that year, my sophomore year, pursuing Tori like a ferret pursues baby chicks. That's right, because ferrets eat baby chicks. I bet you didn't know that. Yeah. And it was very, very difficult, but there was one period during the day, a glorious 7-minute chunk of time where the divine moment arrived, that the schedule aligned, and my class was right next to Tori's class, meaning that when the fifth period bell rang, that if I timed it right, and if I collected my things into my backpack quick enough and made my way into the hallway before she got out of her room, that if I did everything right, we could walk down the hallway together. We had to. It's the way we were both going. And so every day, when the bell rang, I'd grab my stuff and run out into the hallway, and I wasn't even really that sly about it. I would just kind of stand there in the middle of the hallway, like a puppy at the pound. Like, please, ma'am, pick me or they'll put me down. And I know that I wasn't sly about it because, well, everyone knew what I was doing. So much so that, well, one of her friends in her Latin class walked out one day and saw me and said this. I could see her mouthing it to Tori. Well, look, there's your little sophomore friend. I know, I was there. And I thought in that moment, they know what grade I'm in. And every day I waited, and every day, if I waited, I would walk from my 5th hour class to my 6th hour class next to Tori and try to strike up a conversation. And every day that I waited was worth it. It's what we called in Spanish class, excelente. And I don't know. I don't know how long you've been waiting. I don't know how long you will wait on God. But I know this. He never wastes a minute of waiting. And that while you're waiting on him to answer a prayer or open a door or change somebody's heart, he is doing a work in you that is transforming you from who you are now into who he wants you to be, and that is more like his son. And can I just say this too? If you're not where you want to be right now with your life or with your walk, that doesn't disqualify you from kingdom work now, and it doesn't disqualify you from kingdom work in the future. Because I believe Philippians 1, when Paul says that he who began a good work in us will carry it out to completion. He's not going to do this overnight, but the good news is he doesn't have to. And Elisha waited, and eventually Elisha's time came. And we read this. Here's what happens. 50 men from the company of the prophets went and stood at a distance, facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. And the water divided right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. And when they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, okay, so tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you? Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit, Elisha replied. You've asked a difficult thing, Elijah said. Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise, it will not. Now, I know there are some historical and cultural things at play in this little piece of the story, but to be honest, I've always kind of felt this was a little odd. Like, who does Elisha think that he is? He's walking up to probably the most prominent prophet in all of the Old Testament and says, I want to be twice as strong and twice as powerful as you. Well, that's crazy. But what if it isn't? Because, yeah, it's a bold prayer and everything, but like, why wouldn't God want to bless Elisha like this? God's story has always been about expanding and growing and getting bigger and bigger. This seems like a really natural, question when you think about what God's trying to do in the world. Yet, sometimes I think that God is maybe sitting at the edge of heaven waiting to answer some really bold, similar prayer requests from us. He's wanting to open doors for us, just like he did for Elisha, that we never get around to asking. It's almost as if we could just expand our imagination to fit what his purpose for our life is, our lives could be radically transformed. A few years ago, my daughter was in preschool, and the teacher had made this assignment. So these are 4-year-olds, but she said, I want you to go home, and I want you to draw on color on a piece of paper what you want to be when you grow up. This is a pretty typical thing kids do in school, and so they did this. They went back, and the teacher put all of the little drawings and stuff in a book. And then she laminated them and sent them back home. And so each parent got a book full of all the different things that kids in Alice's class wanted to be when they grew up. I remember sitting down at the table, looking through them, thinking, okay, well, this is really cute. These are really fun. These are all pretty typical. And so I made some copies of them and brought them with you to see. So here's one here. This is Jace, a kid in Alice's preschool class with a Captain America shield. And he's a fireman, supposedly. Oh, good, this is Alice's, right? This is really good. She wants to be a lifeguard. We would, a good job, and everything else. And she's pointing out here that, hold on, go back to that. She's pointing out here that she has her arms and legs, which are important to being a lifeguard. So we go to the next one here. Yes, this is Shay. She wants to be a teacher at a nudist colony where they study pineapples. Oh, good. Carson is here. Yeah, that's good. Carson wants to be a disembodied policeman. Chicken legs. So this is kind of, oh, yes, good. Brooke, I don't know what she's doing to that dog, but she wants to be a veterinarian. So this is what it looked like. 20 of these, right? And we all of a sudden get to the last page, and it was a kid named Dashiell. And I thought what you're thinking right now, Dashiell's not a real name, but and Dashiell's caught me by surprise, because when I got to Dashiell's page, I saw this. And I don't know what a tree rex is. I'm assuming, if I break the words down, that it's the king of the trees, which if you're going to be a tree, you might as well be the king of them. And I've not forgotten this, because this, well, it stood out to me, one, but also two, I began to think, well, what if Dashiell's right? Like, what if Dashiell's onto something? I think we spend so much of our time being so concerned about what other people think of us. And so much time laboring and striving, trying to, fit into everyone else's standards and do things that everyone else would approve of. And I think sometimes God looks over the rails of heaven and asks us, hey, you want to be a tree rex? You go, I've never heard of a tree rex before. Exactly. I just made it up. But like no one else at my school is a tree rex. Right. That's the point. But they'll make fun of me. Also the point. And I just think, man, there are things that we are leaving on the table. That God wants to do things with us if we would only stop long enough and ask Him to do them. And as you leave this week, my question for you is simply, what does being a tree rex look like in your life? And when we pray those types of prayers, we saw it in Elisha's story, and I promise you it'll happen in yours as well. When we pray those bold prayers, God acts, and He does the impossible. And our story continues. It says this: as they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. And Elisha saw him no more. Then he took hold of his garment and he tore it in two. I have to think that this happened so quickly that Elisha didn't even have time to take out his phone and take a picture of it. Hashtag sweet chariot, hashtag he gone. This is not a quiet whisper in a cave. This is God pulling out all the stops. A tornado, a chariot of fire, over in an instant. And I think it's funny that it's often those big climactic moments in our life that are here and gone before we even blink. I mean, take this week, for example. It went by really, really fast. And the wild thing about tornadoes is that they're really, really loud, and then in an instant, really, really quiet. I know this because in May of 2011, a tornado rolled through my neighborhood, like literally through my neighborhood. It was a Sunday afternoon. My wife, Tori, that's right, I waited after class long enough that I eventually married her. Thank you. Now, thank you. Two quick things I feel obligated to point out. First is this. There was a lot of things that happened between then and now. It's not quite that easy. And two, fellas, I just have to point this out. This is not a prescription, right? This is just something that happened to me. I'm not encouraging you to camp outside a girl's house and wait for her to marry you, right? It's not how it works in Kentucky. I don't think, right? Like it's different. It's different, right? But it's what happened to me. It's how we did it in Oklahoma. Now, on a Sunday afternoon, I left my wife, Tori, and our 4-week-old daughter, Alice, at home to go across town and work. It was just kind of a nice May afternoon. A bluebird sky, I mean, really just a beautiful day. But I grew up in Oklahoma, so I know how the skies work, and it's so funny how all of a sudden you can go from a beautiful afternoon where the skies are blue and they can turn deadly in just a few moments. And that's what happened that afternoon. I was across town, I was texting my wife back and forth, and we started to, get noticed that a storm might have been forming, and all of a sudden we went under a tornado warning, and they sounded the sirens, and I can't get home to her, and I'm texting her and those types of things. Are you okay? Okay, get Alice, go down into the basement. And you can see our text thread, I've saved it, and all of a sudden, at about 5:47, Tori forgot how to spell. Because an F5 that stretched a half-mile long was going through our neighborhood. And Tori was in our basement of our 60-year-old bungalow home, huddled with our daughter. It was loud, really loud. And when I kind of thought it was time to maybe drive across town to get home, I got in my car and I kind of made my way to the south side of our city. And I got about 3 blocks away, and that was as close as I could get because I just lost all sense of direction. No landmarks, you see. And I just remember the sky was blue again, but also really, really big. And I jogged down the street in the direction of where our house once stood, and I stood out in what was left of our yard, kind of looking around, trying to find someone. And I'll never forget the moment that Tori came down the street holding Alice, our dog, walking beside her. And I just hugged her. I just said, "You did everything right." And my girls were all safe. My house was destroyed, but our girls were safe. Yeah. "164 people died that afternoon. One of the deadliest storms in U.S. history. And I remember standing outside the next morning, trying to make sense of the calamity and clutter, and not really knowing what to do next. I mean, grabbing forks just seemed kind of pointless in that moment. And I was overwhelmed, and I remember a friend put his hand on my shoulder, and he just said, "Hey, let's just do the next thing. Let's just do the next thing." And maybe God has rolled into your life this week, and He's rearranged your priorities like that storm rearranged my living room 8 years ago. Maybe He's made a sense of a holy mess out of your life, and you're standing in the middle of this, about to get on a bus, not really sure what to do next. Can I encourage you to do what Elisha did? Just do the next thing. And you might be tempted in a week or 2 weeks or a month, and you'll be sitting there and you'll be going, I just don't feel like I did at Move. God doesn't feel the same way now as He did at Move. Why are things so different? Because they're supposed to be. we get this bad rap sometime at events like this. We call it the CIY high, right? Well, it's called the CIY high because, well, you've eaten so much pizza and Pringles and drink so much Red Bull, and you've ingested a good amount of sunscreen at this point that you right now are literally high. Literally. The chemicals in your body are just going, we are done with all of this. And you're tired, and it's just time to go home. It really, really is. And can I tell you this? If it doesn't feel, if your relationship with God doesn't feel like it does right now in 4 weeks, that's because it's just not going to. God is starting something here with you this week. He's not finishing anything. It really is up to us now to try to figure out how to take what we've learned here and apply it into our daily walk. And can I also say this? That if you make a commitment here this week, that for one reason or another, you feel like you fail at doing, that doesn't make it any less real. God is extremely patient and knows that it is a process. All he's asking us to do is the next thing, because it goes really, really quick. That's what Elisha did. He says this: Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the cloak that had fallen from Elijah and struck the water with it. Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah? He asked. When he struck the water, it divided to the right and to the left, and he crossed over. And all of a sudden, Elijah's scene was over. And the story continued. And it happens so fast. It does move quick, right? Any graduated seniors in here? Graduated senior? Right here. You're a graduated senior. What's your name? Mike? Nice to meet you, Mike. You've just graduated high school. Go ahead and stand up for me if you will. So, Mike, what I think is really interesting, are you ready? Here we go. Mike, what I think is interesting is, good catch. Yeah, back here. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. What I find so fascinating, you just graduated high school a couple weeks ago, a month ago, whatever. I've done youth ministry stuff for long enough, and I've been around high school students. I kind of know the culture and those types of things. All right, I'm up here, please. There we go. Right. I've done high school stuff long enough that we're getting there. I'm throwing, oh, sorry, hit you in the hands. Go get it. This is kind of my thing. Yeah, sorry. So I've done high school things long enough that I think people, you're good. I like that. That's good. You're good. However you want to throw, Mike. Done stuff long enough that people just kind of collectively lose their mind when they talk to people that are graduating, right? They'll say things like, oh my gosh, Mike, you're graduating? Like, that can't be possible. And you go, well, yeah, it is. That's how time works. It moves. And people will say things like, man, Mike, we're going to miss you, and you're not going to believe, like, what are we going to do without you? And there's no, our youth group will never be the same because you guys, this class of 19, oh, such great leaders and so powerful, and man, the influence you guys had and everything else, and there's no way that we'll ever be able to. But here's what happens, Mike. Every time a senior class graduates, any incoming freshmen over here, right here? Yeah. Hi, just the first person I saw. What's your name? Zoe? Nice to meet you. Go ahead and stand up, Zoe. So Zoe, every time a senior graduates, an 8th grader becomes a 9th grader. And what we have to do here is this. You ready? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, you can sit down. Yeah. And here's the deal, Mike. Here's the deal. They'll say things to you. They'll say things like, we're going to miss you so much. And when they say that, they are lying to you. Because what will happen is, if we do to be continued right, the moment a senior graduates, ready? Yeah. It's really good. But it doesn't work unless we do this. And this right here is kind of what Christianity is all about. It's a senior passing the ball to a freshman. And I believe that if we truly pray those double portion type prayers, that the best day of your youth ministry, of your youth group, the best days, Mike, I hate to break it to you, are ahead of you, not behind you. And this is what we do, and what we've done since Elijah handed off to Elisha, and Jesus handed off to his disciples, and didn't just give them a double portion of the Spirit, but gave them and us the Spirit. It's what Paul did with Timothy, and it's what my grandfather has done with me. Thank you. Because, well, everything I've been given, I got from somebody else. And what's this have to do with my shoe size? Everything. Last October on a Sunday morning at 7:45, my mom called me. And immediately I knew this was bad news because one, who calls people? And two, it was 7:45 in the morning on a Sunday. So much so that I answered the phone. I said, "What's wrong?" She said on the other line, holding back tears, she said, Granddad had an aneurysm burst, and he's not going to make it. Okay. So I skipped church that morning, and I drove the 2 hours down to the hospital near his home. And I sat at the edge of his bed with the rest of my cousins and family as the nurses made him as comfortable as they could. And that afternoon, his scene ended. You know, I wasn't ready for it. And I guess you never really are, right? People ask if it was sudden, and I go, well, he was 90. That's too long. And honestly, what gave me so much peace is how confident he was in what was next. He would say, kind of tongue-in-cheek with a twinkle in his eye, you know, you're not getting out of this world alive. And he was ready, even if I wasn't. And his story really wasn't ending, you see. He had a faith and a confidence to know that when you are wrapped up in a story that's bigger than yours, that story never, ever ends. And eternal life is not just something that we prepare for. No, it's something we rehearse for and actually live in today. And a few weeks ago, I was at my grandmother's house, which, now that I say it, feels really weird to call it that. I was at my grandmother's house, and she said, Eric, I need you to go in Granddad's closet. I said, no, that's weird. She said, no, I need you to go in his closet because no one else can wear those shoes. Okay. So I went into his closet and flipped on the light, and it had not changed in 7-8 months. Clothes still hung exactly like they were that October morning. And I went over to the shoe rack, and I pulled off a pair of his shoes. And I sat down on the floor in the closet, and something came over me. And it wasn't really a fear of death as much as it was a pure, clear realization that I was still here. And it is still my scene. And as I put on those shoes for the first time, I just thought, I don't know what I'm doing with most of my life, but I know this. I think the call of Christianity is to follow Jesus, be as influential as possible, and then to be forgotten. Because the story's not really about you anyway. And I might as well live to the best of my ability, to the fullness with everything that I have, every day that I have, as long as it still is my scene. And I stood up in the closet and looked down at these shoes. And you know what? Yeah, they might be a little big. But we've all got big shoes to fill.